From the very first morning, something felt wrong in that enormous mansion. The billionaire, Zayn Malik, a man known for owning half the tech companies in the city, stood helplessly at the edge of his infant son's crib, watching the tiny boy grow weaker day by day. No doctor could explain it. No test showed anything unusual. But every sunrise, little Zayn's breathing grew softer, his cry grew fainter, and his small hands barely moved. Nurses came and went, specialists tried their best, yet no one could answer the one question crushing Zayn's heart. Why is my baby fading away? What no one knew, not the billionaire, not the doctors, not the nurses, was that the answer was hidden somewhere no one had even looked, until the quiet, unnoticed Maid stepped forward with courage no one expected. Zayn had never felt fear the way he felt it those weeks. He had built an empire from nothing, fought boardroom wars, survived betrayals and headlines, but none of that compared to watching his baby's strength slip through his fingers. Every morning before sunrise, he rushed to the nursery, and every morning he found his son weaker than the last. The medical team stayed inside the mansion all night, monitoring everything from the temperature to the air filters, but nothing explained the strange pattern. It was always the mornings, only the mornings. He barely slept, he barely ate. His world narrowed to the tiny crib and the tiny heartbeat he prayed wouldn't stop. In the background, the staff walked like ghosts, afraid to disturb him. Only one person seemed to watch everything silently. Aaliyah, the young maid who cleaned the nursery floors and tidied the blankets. She never spoke unless spoken to. She came from a small village and carried herself with simple grace. Everyone overlooked her, except the baby. Whenever she walked into the room, Zayn's eyes, no matter how tired, seemed to follow her point. One night, when the doctor announced again, "We still don't know what's causing the weakness," Zayn's composure cracked. He stepped out onto the balcony and pressed his face into his hands as memories of his late wife flooded back. She had passed away just days after childbirth, asking him with her last breath to protect our baby, always. He felt like he was failing her, failing his son, failing himself. Aaliyah, bringing clean sheets toward the hallway, heard him quietly sobbing. She froze, unsure if she should turn away or help, but something inside her urged her to step forward. She walked closer and whispered, "Sir, I don't mean to intrude, but maybe it's something very small that everyone is missing." Zayn blinked, surprised. No staff member had dared speak to him softly like that in weeks. He didn't answer, but something about her sincerity made him nod. The next morning was the worst. Zayn's skin looked pale, his breaths rapid and weak. Panic spread through the room as monitors beeped. The doctor said, "We need to take him to the hospital now." But as the nurses lifted the baby, Aaliyah noticed something no one had checked. Something tucked gently and almost invisibly under the baby's arm. "Wait! Stop!" she cried, louder than she had ever spoken in her life. Everyone stared at her. She rushed to the crib, gently lifted the baby's arm, and pulled out a tiny object. A small cloth charm, sewn tightly with thread, smelling faintly of herbs. Zayn's confusion grew. "What is that?" Aaliyah trembled. "Sir, I have seen these before. In my village, some people believe charms like this can protect a child. Others use them the wrong way." The room fell silent. "Where did it come from?" Zayn demanded. No one answered. No one admitted anything. But the nurses exchanged uneasy glances, and suddenly one of them broke down, whispering that an older nurse, no longer working there, had secretly placed it weeks ago, claiming it would bring blessings. Instead, the charm contained herbs that cause slow allergies, harmless to adults, harmful to a newborn. It was never meant to hurt him, but it had been slowly draining the baby's strength every night while he slept on that side. The charm was removed instantly. The bedding was changed. The room was cleaned deeply. And by the afternoon, Zayn's breathing steadied. By evening, he opened his eyes wider than he had in weeks. By night, he gripped his father's finger again, weak but improving. Zayn couldn't believe it. The doctors were stunned. Nurses cried with relief. But above all, the billionaire looked at the maid who had noticed what none of them had. "Aaliyah, you saved my son." She shook her head. I just paid attention, sir. Anyone would have done the same. But he knew that wasn't true. She had not only seen what others missed. She had spoken up when everyone else stayed silent, and in the days that followed, Izan grew stronger. His cheeks filled with color, his tiny hands lifted in the air. His faint cry turned into a healthy one. The mansion, once filled with tension and fear, slowly filled with life again. And everything changed between Zion and the staff. He began noticing the people who worked quietly in the background. He realized how much he had ignored them, how much he had lived above the world instead of with it, especially after his wife's death. One evening, as Aliyah folded the baby's new blankets, Zion approached her with gentle eyes. My son is alive because you cared enough to look. I can't ever repay that. She nodded shyly. You don't need to, sir. I only did what any mother would want someone to do for her child. The words struck him deeply because he remembered his wife's final request. And so, the billionaire made a decision that shocked everyone. He promoted Aliyah, not to a higher staff role, but to be Azan's personal caretaker, a trusted position usually reserved for trained professionals. There is no training stronger than a heart that cares, he said. He also arranged for her education, her family's support, and her future, not as charity but as gratitude. Every morning from then on, when the sun rose through the nursery window, the baby no longer grew weaker. Instead, he grew stronger. And every morning, Zion stood behind the crib, no longer alone, no longer afraid, knowing that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones the world overlooks.